Storytelling is both an art and a science. Integrity is a core of a story. Once we have the context clear, then we go ahead and construct or structure our story. So these are the non negotiable fundamentals of any story. It has to be something that actually appeals to you. It's not about how much can I deliver, it's about how much value can I bring on table. The uniqueness in the art of storytelling.
Welcome to the Stars of Learning podcast, where your host Jyoti G explores the minds of the thought leaders who have vast experience and in depth knowledge in the learning industry. Now, over to your host Jyoti G.
Hello, everyone. Hearty welcome to season 3 of Stars of Learning podcast. And my name is Jyoti G. So, friends, in today's world, no matter what you do, we have grown up hearing two stories and we are all storytellers. And don't you agree that we build a strong connection with people with stories? Now, are you connecting to an interesting story told by your mother, grandma, or a dad, or an uncle? Yes, friends, I'm sure you will agree that stories are how we learn best. And I was reading Forbes' article, and it says the most successful businesses will consistently deliver high touch to customers with one of our oldest traits, and that's the telling of a story. And see how powerful the storytelling is. By the way, many people and organizations fail drastically as they don't have that story to engage. And I was all the time thinking when I attended one of the storytelling sessions in the past, I thought I should get an expert to share their wisdom on this niche topic, friends. As stories are never ending journey and they are something like a hidden talent, and sometimes it's all in our memories and we need to bring that out. So I was thinking, why not tell it in a right way with the right framework and making it impactful. And here is my guest on Stars of Learning podcast, who is a storyteller by passion and profession. Yes, friends, if you're curious hearing to me till now, believe me, you are in the right place. So get ready to decode the magic of storytelling. And that's the topic for today on how to engage people's heart and mind as a good storyteller. As believe me, storytelling, it's a powerful form of human communication. And today we will have conversation with one and only Nidhi Mahesh, founder of We-Storytellers. So, friends, a quick intro about our guest Nidhi Mahesh. With almost 2 decades in the business of storytelling, a storyteller by passion and profession, and she has been a storyteller all her life. So, friends, I saw her profile and blog and got so glued as she digs for stories that the world is waiting to hear. And I really enjoyed reading her blog and those catchy titles which she has put in, which you can't miss it when you get onto her site. And I felt this is the need of the hour to master the art of storytelling. So I'm sure you might not have ventured into storytelling. So stay tuned, guys. You will see value for yourself in our conversation. So put your gears on, and without any further ado, let me welcome my guest, Nidhi Mahesh from We Storytellers. Once again, a warm welcome, Nidhi Mahesh, to Stars of Learning podcast.
Thank you very much, Jyoti. Thanks for having me. And I'm sure your podcast, I know this is pretty popular, and your listeners have had some very great orators and speakers, and who have shared their pearls of wisdom. I'm glad to be here, and I'm hoping to add some value to your listeners and give them some interesting tidbits that they would love to hear.
Sure, I'm really excited that you're joining me, Nidhi. So, Nidhi, before we jump into this interesting topic to decode the magic of storytelling, so let's begin with the why, Nidhi. and make us understand the science of storytelling.
Well, storytelling is both an art and a science. And I keep saying that the magic happens when the two blend, right? It's a cusp of magic, cusp of science and arts where the magic actually unveils. So the science behind us is that there are chemical reactions that happen in our mind when we are listening to a story. So we have recently done a blog on it, the science of storytelling, on our blog, which is westorytellers.in/blogs. And we explained what actually happens to your mind when you're listening to a story. So your mind, there are the chemicals that actually come that are invoked when you're listening to a story. There are oxytocin is one of the chemicals that actually starts your your experience, where what happens is, when you have oxytocin, this is kind of a lifesaver. It is the marketer's friend. This is a hormone that actually makes you, or the chemical that makes you empathetic. So you are connected to something, you are able to empathize because this particular chemical is invoked in your mind. And that's the power of a story. But how do we get to empathy, right? So there's another chemical called dopamine, which is actually the pleasure giver. So here, is aids your learning system and rewards you with pleasure. And all heuristic behavior that you have are somewhere associated with this particular chemical. But I don't want to get into the science behind it. There is cortisol, which actually is invokes attention. It lets you, it seeks attention from you, especially when you see a FOMO campaign, right? Get this 20% off, and or buy it now. So this urgency that comes in it kind of invokes cortisol in your mind, and it makes you act. It gives you the fear, if I don't act now, maybe I'm going to miss out on something. Again, marketers use it very effectively when they design their campaign, when they build their story. So this is the science behind this. There are these three main chemicals: cortisol, dopamine, and oxytocin, that come together to give a holistic experience as a person who's listening to, or who's reading, or he's exploring a story. So that's the science of it. And now, the science itself will not help you much, because this, we know all this, right? This is happening in our brain, but how do we get there? How do we invoke these emotions? How do we activate these chemicals in the mind? And I'm sure no marketer or no story that will actually sit down and say, okay, now I'm going to activate this particular chemical in your mind, or that chemical. But this is actually happening at the background. What do you see in front of you is the art, right? And that's where the beauty of a story lies. And a story is different for every person. See, you would be reading a book, I'll be reading the same book, but our experiences would be a bit different. The way we relate to a story is very unique to us, and it's also very contextual. There will be instances that you've read something, say 5 years back, and you were completely in awe with that particular writing. You go back to it today, you're not able to connect, you don't really appreciate it that much. That's because the context has changed, your frame of mind has changed. So story means different things to different people. When your question was why story. Story is something which helps us connect. It is, and you, as mothers, we would see, how our kids actually warm up to a story. You tell them something to do and they won't be interested, but the moment you say it through a story, or through an incident, or through an anecdote, you see a much more receptiveness in them. So it happens to the audience, it happens to the consumers. If there's a story which is accompanying a product, you are more likely to connect to it. So when you ask why story, because stories connect. It's as simple as that.
Sure, sure. And that's a great insight. Story helps us to connect. And this became a base to our conversation. And what I hear you loud that, it is important in all walks of life. So, at corporate life, or in any profession, how can they take this up to a next level? So what are the techniques of storytelling, Nidhi?
So storytelling, of course, there are different techniques that you employ when you're writing a story, and as I said, context matters a lot. So there's no one size fit all, or I can't give you these three things that you should do to write, right? Those would keep on evolving and changing, but there are certain basic fundamentals that are non-compromisable, right? That you cannot, that's non-negotiables of stories, as I call them. One is that you have to be a very good listener. You need to know what your audience is willing to absorb, what would make them engage and connect, and that comes from listening. When I say listening, listening is an art in itself. You listen to your audience in different ways. There are cues. When they are in front of you, you know from their body language. When they are not in front of you, you would use data to get to them, right? To get to understand your target audience, their behaviors, their propensity to certain offers, their propensity the to the to what's happening around them, the socioeconomic aspect of it. So understanding who your customer is or who your audience is very important, and that's where your listening comes into play. You get to understand what is happening around the space where your audience exists, not just one person or a one persona, but looking at it holistically. Then once you have the understanding through a deep listening, you identify the context of your story. What, because you can't have a very wide ranging story. You try to say too many things together, you will lose your audience, right? So we need to get very specific to what is it that I want to tell today that my audience would be interested to listen to or engage with. In that, we need to very narrowly look at the context in which this conversation has to happen. Once we have the context clear, then we go ahead and construct or structure our story. Now, this is where most of the writers become lazy, or say that okay, this is going to come naturally, right? But this is the science, this is the foundation. Here, unless we structure our story, what is going to be my beginning? How am I going to begin? How am I developing the plot? How am I leading my audience on to an action? And that's the science of it. That's the structure of it. That structuring is very important. I keep saying that writing a story is 20% of work. Coming to that story is 80% of work. That's, you come to that when you are listening, when you are getting a clarity on what you want to say, what are your key messages that you want to deliver, and then set a context. And in that context, you create a structure, and then you create your story around it. So these are the non-negotiable fundamentals of any story.
Okay, okay. So true, Nidhi. When I actually listen to stories, right, some stories are compelling and memorable, and some childhood stories I still able to recall. And you did say that stories helps us to connect, and in the process, what I feel is integrity in the story also matters. So, what is your thought on this?
Integrity is a core of a story. You just cannot have a story which is non-believable. I cannot be cheating my audience, right? If I do that, I can do it once, but never again. I lose them forever. So integrity is a core of story, and you would see around, right? So many fake news going around, so many anchors shouting from the top of their lungs, and but not just by shouting or repeating something, that it won't become truth, right? One day or the other, you'll people will figure out, and then they will never be able to believe you. It's a trust that you lose, right? Once you lose it, it's very difficult for you to gain back. So the way I see it, the integrity comes from the intent of your story. What are you intending to do? Of course, with if I'm a marketer or if I'm a storyteller, what I would want is to have my audience's attention. I do have actions for them that I want them to take, right? But then in doing so, of course, my intention is to engage. But in doing so, do I want to trick them? Do I want to deceive them? If I do that, I'm actually losing them. Integrity of the story is something that drives your trust, and there are legitimate means or to gain visibility and to develop engagement. And then on the other hand, you have cheap theatrics and a free for all circus.
Hmm.
So misleading on purpose or creating a false narrative or masquerading wild goose chase as facts. So facts. Facts remain fact, right? You cannot manipulate a fact. So, for example, if I'm doing a research for a story, I need to go to a credible source. I cannot just quote just about anybody. It cannot be a hearsay, right? And facts have to be validated. People who are if I'm speaking to you, Jyoti, I would know that you are a practitioner in learning and development, right? So
Yeah.
if I have a thought on learning and development, I can validate with you. But for example, if I have a thought on, say, artificial intelligence, I cannot come to you to validate that, right? I need to go
Yeah.
to a credible source who can validate. So, and you would see this happening on a daily basis. You would see someone speaking about a topic of that the person has absolutely no basis to know, right? I may have an opinion, but does my opinion count? Do I bring that depth of understanding or the validity of facts in that conversation? So therefore, integrity is very important. And as a storyteller, we have to be very, very careful which facts are we putting in, and are our facts really validated.
Well said, and I can't agree more. So beautifully laid out, Nidhi. So then here is a critical question to you, Nidhi. As I see your profile, where you equip marketing leaders across business to define, design, and execute the campaigns, and you actually craft those engaging stories, right? So how do we build and deliver that engaging stories, say for a specific business scenarios, and it's just not about the story, but we need to drive an intended action too. So how do we go about that?
Great question, Jyoti, and this is something that I grapple with on a daily basis. So, if you go to my blog site, you'll find a particular blog that says of content and storytelling. So, here's the difference between a content that you churn out or a story you tell. Marketers have been, I won't say forced, but yeah, most of the time we just look at quantity of content coming out. Am I writing so many blogs? Am I creating so many case studies? Do I have enough white papers? So what we go for is most of the time quantity, because you want to keep on bombarding your audience with content. Now, am I able to connect with that? You keep on getting something or the other on your inbox. You keep on seeing something or the other on your timeline. Do you
Mhm.
really engage? No, right? It
Right.
has to be something that actually appeals to you. Does it matter to me? The simple question that every person, every marketer or storyteller has to answer for the audience is, what is in it for me?
Hmm.
What am I giving that person who's reading that particular piece? That's the core of it. So that's why you need storytelling, because as I said, right, stories connect. Now, to give you a scenario, for example, in most of the time in sales pitches, you would have 50, 60 slides. A salesperson in an enterprise sales environment has got 40 minutes from the decision maker. The person goes there in a room full of executives. You have a projector running, and the person goes and quickly puts the pen drive and starts the presentation and begins by telling all the stuff about who the person or is, what is the company all about, and says all sorts of things. But what is it that you want the decision maker to do? What is it that you are at that point of time proposing? What pain are you solving? Right? That conversation is either buried after 35 minutes of your 40-minute conversation or is left for another day. Now, where have you connected? You did a lot of preparation. You put everything you had on that presentation in a 50 slide because you wanted to cover everything. Right? But what was the information that you were giving that the person could not find himself? You could have talked about the pain. You could have talked about why you are here and why should that person trust you to solve the problem that he has. But that's a story that he wants to listen to. And the conversation has to be at eye level. I am talking to a person face to face or a person on a nowadays on a remote environment. When I say eye level, is that I am on the same wavelength. And to get the person on the same wavelength, it's important that we build a common ground. We are in our mental space in different zones, right? Not just a time zone, but we I might be coming right from a very stressful meeting. I may have been come a discussion where my performance was being discussed, for example. Or I have a child who's been continuously knocking on my door and I'm pretty irritated. Or I've just finished a good conversation with a colleague and who's appreciated me. So I'm in a happy state of mind. So I'm in a different zone. You are in a different zone. How do we bridge that gap? How do we come to a common ground? And setting a common ground sometimes is not just the business. So we need to know the person I'm going to speak to. Do a bit of research. Where the person comes from, what kind of schooling, which college or which school that the person went to, what kind of interest does he or she have. So what happens is when I'm going there, and suppose I say, "Hey Jyoti, you are from Bangalore." "Oh, I'm from Bangalore too." Which place? So what happens is you think that it's a small talk, but somewhere I'm bringing that person down to the same level. Okay, you went to that college. I also went to that college, or someone I know went to that college. What you have done is that from wherever that person was in his mental state, you have brought them to that school or that college at that point in time where you were also there. So you have built a common ground. Or, for example, if you're not able to do that, with your story that you're presenting, so you are talking about a pain that the person may have. So, for example, you are going there, going to a company and talking about an LMS platform that they're considering. Now, if you say that you start with that 50% of people, companies have an LMS where uh, the employees are not fully utilizing it, they are leaving it half done. Now, that's something 50% somewhere out there. It's a number. The moment you say, "You know what, the company, yesterday I went to a company, I met an employee and he said, you know what, I really find it interesting to have this, learning program. It's just that I'm not able to spend time at one go, right? And that's the problem that I face. How do I get over that?" I'm bringing that problem. I'm actually creating a scenario that you may be facing because if I'm trying to sell you a product which actually enables an employee to be able to continue the learning in different phases, which would be a value prop of my product. I am able to sell that to you at the very beginning without actually making a sales pitch. That's because I have been able to connect to the pain that you may have, and that too with a very relatable experience, right? So this is where the storytelling comes in.
Interesting, Nidhi. So you laid out the complete ground on talking about the content to what's in it from the point of audience, looking at the pain points and trust part, and specifically important why you're here, and bridge that gap in an appropriate way and bring that to a common ground so it doesn't really look like a sales pitch.
Yes, so that's what I see, right? But sometimes, and of course, we have to sell. That's what businesses are all about. I run a company which which does storytelling for a living, right? So I'm also trying to sell, but I cannot be selling it on your face, right? I need to be able to solve a problem that you have and give you the trust that yes, Nidhi is someone, or Nidhi's team is someone, or we storytellers can help me solve this problem? And how do I
Hmm.
build that trust? Not by blatantly going and saying, please buy, tie up with us, and we'll give you so many pieces of content in a month. It's not about how much can I deliver. It's about how much value can I bring on table. Right? That's a conversation that's important.
This is very powerful. So Nidhi, you have been in a creative pursuit, being a mentor to storytellers and bloggers, right? Please tell us on, are there any type of stories which we should be mindful?
So, Jyoti, as I said in the beginning, stories are unique to people and stories are unique to context. As long as your story has integrity, as long as your story is built on on a premise of the listener, what the listener wants to know. So, what is the storyteller doing? He's actually bridging the gap between what you want to say and the what the audience wants to listen. Most of the time, especially in the marketing context, this gap is there, or this gap keeps on increasing, and that's where the marketing campaigns or any conversation for that matter fails. Right?
Hmm.
We keep on doing it in our personal lives. Right? I want to say something, yeah, my husband wants to listen to something else, and we are just not able to communicate. And like, I keep on saying, hey, I wanted this and you didn't listen. The person says, okay, I was listening, it didn't come out what you were trying to tell me. So there's a gap, and this gap
Hmm.
exists in our personal lives. It also there in our professional sphere when we are trying to communicate, and there should not be this gap. To bridge
Hmm.
that gap is the story. The story, because the story is always told from the point of view of what the reader might take away from it. That's something that you should keep in mind when you're talking when you're creating a story. And stories are unique, right? So when you say what kind of stories I should have in mind, or what stories we should not tell, so stories which are not relatable, stories which are only there are a lot of things that, and I keep saying to people who write along with us, is that a lot of things is there in your mind. Okay, when I'm reading that piece, it's actually not coming through. Then I ask, is this what you wanted to say? You say yes, exactly, that's what. Nothing is, it's like half of the words are inside your mouth. I'm not able to listen to it because you have not fully expressed it. So many a times we take it for granted that my audience knows this, right?
Hmm.
It's not
Yeah,
always the case.
true.
Not I'm assuming too much. I'm putting the onus of deciphering my intent on the audience. Now that's too much to ask, right?
Hmm.
If you recall the genre of the so-called art films, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
It would never become a mass movie, or it would not relate to a large segment of audience. That's because it put a lot of onus on the viewer to understand and decipher the context. On the other hand, the mass movies, they appeal to a larger audience because they just put everything out there bare.
Got it. Got
And
it.
of course, you can have a choice that you choose one context. But as a storyteller, my job is to make sure that my audience, my intended audience, is able to appreciate the story.
Got it. So Nidhi, you were telling that there are some basic fundamentals which are non-negotiable, and like listening, context, or the structure of we put in. So, is there any framework or a template you would want to recommend for us to follow?
So, as I said, for me, a construct or the fundamental framework of a story definitely is an understanding of the flow of a story, intent of the story, the key messages that you want to convey, and what action do you want your audience to take, right? All these when you keep in mind and create a structure, and that structure is very contextual. It changes. Sometimes I lead with intrigue, right? I wrote a piece which says you should not be reading this piece.
Hmm.
Now, that is an intrigue. The moment I tell you not to do it, you'll say, why is asking me? Why is this person telling me not to do it? So that's an intrigue. It works in certain cases. Or there's
Yes.
an intro which kind of gives you a real bummer, gives you like, oh my god, it's happening. Or when we were waiting for the vaccine, you if you say that 48 hours to go and India will have its own vaccine. Now this is again a different kind of lead. So you lead differently in different contexts. There are different ways of saying things. Then there's we call it bullet leads,
Hmm.
which are like which says which kind of goes like tuck tuck tuck, and first thing,
Hmm.
the world is changing. You have
Got
a few things that you need to start working on. But what is fundamental to it is, what is it that you want to say, your intent and messaging, the flow of a story, and the call to action that you want to drive home, what you want your audience to do.
So Nidhi, it's just not the story, right? We need to create a high impact. And being a trainer myself, I also think sometimes your body language, your voice modulation, suspense, the way you said about bringing those titles also makes a difference. It's like seeing a movie, right? So what should one focus or practice while storytelling? Because I want to get to know your views because you have been in that field. Because not all of them carry that charismatic style, right? So, what's your views on this?
Well, what I have realized, and that this is all experience, Jyoti. I have not been to a business school. I've not been to a mass comm course, to learn this. I have been a hands-on person. I've been on the ground all my life, so my learning experience has been from everyday experiences that I see and observe. So one thing I realize is that there is no set pattern. You cannot copy someone. You can idolize someone. You can be inspired by someone. You can admire someone's style, but your style is your own, right? And you need to develop that style. Focus on yourself. Look at
Hmm.
yourself. Stand in front of a mirror, and then talk to yourself. If you can impress yourself, I think you'll be able to impress the and as a trainer, I think you would agree with me that the most critical or the most critique that we get for us is ourselves, right? We are the people who keep judging ourselves. So the moment we stop doing that and we look at ourselves and say, okay, this is working for us and this is not working for us, then our focus is much more on what is possible, what is my strength. Some people are very good orators,
Hmm.
some people are not. So how do you bridge that gap? And that is through practice, right? Someone can just go onto the stage and win the day. Someone will need to practice that, and no less than Steve Jobs. If you see, the guy used to practice a lot. For every appearance, every move of him was practiced and practiced to perfection. The voice modulation, the way he's going to walk on the stage, how he's going to pick out. Say, for example, if you see his the launch of MacBook Air and the way he said Air, the voice that he brought in, that 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 was not something that came spontaneously. It was practiced. So practice is very important, and understand what are your strengths. Play on your strengths. If you're not comfortable speaking spontaneously, there's no harm in you carrying a chit.
Hmm.
uh, and another thing that is important is the ability to look the audience in the eye. You
Hmm.
cannot be enamored. You cannot be scared of that who's there in front of you. Because if that is the case, then your conversation will fail, right? And it's a two-way communication. You have to interact.
Yeah,
Interaction
yeah.
will happen when you are able to look your audience in the eye. When I say you look your audience in the eye, it doesn't literally mean that I'm staring at them. It's that we are able to build that connect, and you have to be then and there with your audience. So these are the things that I think are important, and these are things that I've learned the hard way. So I am just sharing my experience. This is
Got
not something that I can recommend from a book or something.
Sure, sure, Nidhi. So Nidhi, most of my listeners are professionals and students who are aspiring to their career growth, and I see your mission is to build and nurture a new breed of business storytellers. So, how to weave a story to make an uh, impactful presentation? As professional, we keep doing that, right? And most of the time we use data, numbers, statistics, and how do we communicate that key messages? Because it's the PPT. How do we do that through visualization and storytelling? Is there any insight from you?
This again is a very interesting question, Jyoti, and I try to solve this problem with my clients. And what I keep telling them is that numbers in themselves are orphans. They don't really belong anywhere unless you tie them up with the context. Where are we presenting that number? Who's going to listen to that? What am I trying to convey through that number? These are the questions that we need to answer before we put a number out there. Right? You would have seen this mindless numbers going around with the pandemic, right? Someone is saying 25% rise in cases. Someone is saying 3 lakh people uh, rendered jobless. Now, these numbers are okay. These numbers are important. These numbers need to be told. But in what context? You cannot keep on saying the same number in every story, and that's what's happening. And you have suddenly got um, you have a aversion now of reading the same numbers in different contexts. Then another thing that happens is we always quote a Gartner or a McKinsey or a PwC or a Deloitte. This many percentage people are adopting AI. These many companies are going to spend on XYZ technology. The number of employment, like employment numbers, 5 lakh people out of job. Now, the moment you say 5 lakh people out of job, it creates a scare.
Right.
Is my intent is to create a scare, or is my intent to say, okay, 5 lakh people have lost a job, but you know what, in the next 10 year or 10 months, the opportunities are opening up, and there's going to be a large number of hiring, provided you have XYZ skill. I'll give you an example. When we talk about AI and automation, one of the bigger misconception is that it's going to take away your job, and that's a tightrope that every company has to walk. Whenever they talk about automation, they create a fear in their employees. Okay, this automation is going to cut my job. And then what happens is these people, your employees are not fully buying into the program or the project that you're trying to roll in. There's a resistance coming in, and with that resistance, the half-hearted effort in actually implementing that. So they, because they are working for you, they may not be able to say no to it, but you would see they're hesitant to apply, they're hesitant to take it forward. That's because you have what what you have said is that automation is going to bring in 25% more. Yeah, this will be speed, right? The hours of work that you're doing in will be less. Now what happens is you start thinking, okay, if where are these 25% of my time going? That means there'll be less people on the floor, right? So now that interpretation may be wrong. You can say that, okay, you know what, we have two more processes coming up, and where we would need really experienced people, and you are meant for that. Let the robot do the menial work. Now the moment you put that context, yeah, the story gets a positive spin, and the number has a positive connotation. So the numbers, as I said, are orphans. You need to tie them up. You need to put a context around that. And again, you have to narrow down your messaging. You cannot say the same thing to different audiences. You need to make the audience connect. You need to make the audience internalize that message, and therefore a very focused message is important. Brevity is important, and the space for the other person to take a decision, right? Give that space to the person. Just don't keep on if you have a 1 hour time for a conversation, leave at least 10 to 15% of your time, if not more, for the other person to put up questions. In fact, I would suggest 25% of time, right? Where the person is able to come up with his or her observations and have a conversation. You need to converse, build space for that.
Again, business storytelling has become the most powerful tool, right, for today's global leaders, and that's the need of the hour. So, how do we discover stories from real life?
Well, every day we encounter so many incidents, so many things happen in the course of a day, right? And all our life we have been collecting stories. It's just that we need to pick up the right one when we are having the conversation. And it's not that you create a list somewhere on your laptop, and an Excel sheet and say, okay, this story I'm going to say this. It doesn't happen. It's actually pretty intuitive and spontaneous, if you see. So, for example, if I'm talking to you and I understand that you are from the learning and development background, I would try to look for, in my mind, I'm thinking of an incident where a learning and development context has come in. Say, something I did while I was creating some service or some product, or the way I would have interacted with a learning platform. That's references that are coming direct as we speak, right? And you're picking up a story from there. So, you actually dig into your life experience. Many a times there are anecdotes that you have heard. Say, for example, when I talked about Steve Jobs. Now, I had not rehearsed this. I did not think that I'm going to talk about this because we started talking about practice, and it occurred to me that okay, I had seen that particular launch he had. And I was wondering what made it so perfect. And when I went down and read about it, I found that it was actually a good example of how even the top leaders focus on practice. So the anecdote came naturally. So we all have these stories in our kitty. It's just that we need to relate to what will actually resonate with my audience at that point in time. Just pull out the right one. We all have a bag full of stories.
Hmm. Yes, yes. So we have to start think and reflect on what's available in our kitty. Hmm.
Everyone has stories. So
So, Nidhi, in any storytelling, right? Like we, you build that curiosity. Sometimes there are characters, there are suspense, and many other elements it goes into the story. Right? Is there any strategy that how do we do that from the business context?
again, a very interesting question. Jyoti and I had a discussion around it just recently with my team. So let me give you that example. When we write for our clients and we do most of the marketing content, we cannot look at things from the straight vanilla, prospect saying that okay, this is a case study, this is a white paper, and we just go start writing. Depends on the subject that we are writing. The case in point was we were talking about cybersecurity, and the client had come up with a solution which would increase the security quotient if you use that product. Now, I'm talking about that product. I'm talking about why should the say banks have this kind of a tool in their secure to tighten their cybersecurity. Now, when I looked at what my colleague had written, it had all the elements. It was talking about all the features, all the advantages, but somewhere it was You are cooking something, and you have all the ingredients, but something is not coming together. The taste is not there. Yeah. So what do we do? So then I told my colleague that, okay, what are you writing? You're writing a threat report. You're writing about an incident that can actually have a very very strong impact on the company. It's like someone is going to steal, right? And what are you trying to do? You're trying to prevent the theft from happening, or if the theft actually happens, you're trying to catch the burglar at with minimum time. Therefore, what are you doing? You are actually creating a thriller. It's a thriller in your hand. Then you have a plot. You have a thief, and you have a detective running after that person and trying to prevent him from doing the damage. Or in case the damage is done, you immediately act, and you're going to preempt that person's move. So if you look at it, it's actually a thriller in your hand. If you bring in that excitement into your piece, right? Now you build a narrative, you create the suspense, you create your characters. When I say characters, I'm actually not saying that there's going to be a villain persona put in there and a James Bond put in there. But your persona is there. The threat itself is the villain, right? The
Right.
threat is your James Bond, right? So when you start thinking in that line, you have a construct of a thriller in your hand. When you approach that story from that point of view, you see the enrichment that comes into that piece, right?
Wonderful.
Your personas keep changing. You depend. It depends. Sometimes we need to take a very motivational tone.
Hmm.
uh,
Got it.
yeah, sometimes it has to be a humor, wit. So you would have seen this recent when we did a piece again. Keep coming back to our blogs. So we did a recent blog which was where we talked about wit, humor, and uh, and and the way you are able to connect. You would have seen this campaign by Pampers, where they talk about it takes two for parenting. Now, people could have taken a very activist kind of a tone here, right? For why shouldn't father contribute to rearing a child, right? Valid question. But then, how you are trying to put a gun on someone's head, or you're trying to you're trying to point fingers at someone. But look at this. It takes two campaign. It brings in the whole joy of parenthood, of fatherhood, right? It's the same, and there's a bit of a romance in the sense that you're romanticizing that relationship. You're showing that as a father, what kind of joys you have, where changing a nappy is not, you're not making it a, oh my god, I have to do this, but you're making it a kind of a experience that you would want to have with your child. Now, so that story, when you see, it brings in that wit, humor, and relevance, and it takes a tone which actually appeals to you, right? So I think the way you approach your story depends about on what kind of action you want your audience to take, and you have to be very very careful there, because there's no right or wrong way of putting a story. It's just that it depends on the intent that you have behind it.
Got it. So Nidhi, what was your learning as you have done so many workshops and connected with corporates and with the business leaders on storytelling?
My learnings, and this is what actually enriches our work, Jyoti, when the learnings that we gain from each interaction. And what I discovered through the interactions and the workshops that we've had so far is that every person is unique. Every person's approach is unique, and I cannot put a rule and say, okay, everyone has to follow this, or anyone. If so many people pass out every year from management schools and engineering schools and learn the same thing, but the way they apply is different. So there's uniqueness in every person, and we need to be cognizant of that. And when we are creating stories, when we are crafting messages for our audiences, we need to keep that uniqueness in mind. It cannot be a herd kind of a message. But of course, when we say one to one communication, it's not always possible because we are selling products to masses. So therefore, what we try to do, and you would heard this term, we personalize our messages. When I say personalize, again, we bring in a very strong focus on the messaging, right? And the messaging has to be relevant, has to be timely, has to appeal to the audience in that particular time, and that's in their mental state at that moment. So my learnings have been the uniqueness in the art of storytelling.
Sure, Nidhi. So, Nidhi, in anything we do see challenges, right? So you need to look at pros and cons in every subject. So, what are the challenges in this storytelling?
Well, first, for many a times I have all the thoughts in my mind. I'm just looking at a blank paper, thinking where to start. So many a times it's like the starting trouble you have with your car, right? The engine doesn't start, and then you realize there's a battery which is down. So the battery actually comes in from being in a good state of mind and having that clarity. So the challenge is one of the bigger challenges that I face is when we don't have clarity. And initially, what happens is many of people, they hold back from asking questions. They somehow think if I ask this from my client, maybe the person will think that okay, I don't know anything, right? But then
Yeah.
if I don't ask, I won't get the answer. So if I'm not asking questions, I am not showing that I know everything. I'm actually showing that I really don't know what I need to ask, right? That I'm actually I'm exhibiting a false sense of know all. No one is know all, and there are certain questions that need to be asked. We need to have the clarity on purpose, on messages, on who we are talking to. Sometimes this information is available, sometimes it's not, and sometimes and it's very important for us to do a gap analysis, right? What we have in our hand and what we need to make the story engaging and complete. So that gap area needs to be identified and filled up. And so the challenge is not as much to fill that gap, but to figure out what do I need to fill that gap. Whole course of discovery is very important, and we need to be very, very careful about this. As I told you, right, integrity is important. So the um, the credibility of source is very important, right? We are we will be sharing our framework of asking questions very, very shortly, because we found that, and that's how we learn, Jyoti. Every morning when we do a team meet, we discuss, of course, what's going to be on the agenda today and stuff, and then we also pick up challenges that my team faces in terms of delivery, in terms of crafting a content or telling a story, and then we try to find solutions. Okay, if this is happening, what could be the core of the problem, and then we brainstorm and come up with a solution, and which we see is actually a framework or a way of telling story. So what we are now trying to do, and most of the time we are constrained with time and resources to be able to record that, or to actually uh, compile that information. But now we are making a conscious effort, because this is how we are learning the art of storytelling, and we want to share it with the larger audience. So we are now trying to compile all these learnings in a way that that can be shared.
So is there anything else, Nidhi, you would like to add that will be of value to my listeners?
I keep telling everyone that if I can, you can too. There's nothing that holds you back. It's just that you have to identify your calling. It's just that we need to listen to it intently. And don't do it just because you have to. There's nothing like that. There's nothing that you have to do. You always have an option. Don't I don't think that we should let insecurities bog our. I know they're very very real, but then there's always a larger purpose. So I think we need to just and then when it comes to storytelling, what I can share is that keep your eyes and ears open, keep listening, keep observing, keep absorbing, and then you'll be able to improve or enhance your stories.
Wonderful. So guys, all the links and resources which we have discussed in this episode will be made available in my show note page of my podcast Stars of Learning, and also on my website prajvitaknowledge.com, that is PRAJVITA knowledge.com, for your quick reference. Thank you so much, Nidhi, for being on this show and sharing all your wisdom. And I really enjoyed the every conversation we have heard, and many things I have learned in this conversation, starting from science of storytelling to how to the integrity to bring in the core of story, and the integrity with intent is what you highlighted, and the content. It's not about what's in it for me, but it's the core thing. What from the point of audience, what you recommended. You also told a note to not about how much can we deliver, but how much are we bringing a value, right? Numbers, they are like orphaned by themselves, and how do we make it more contextual? And giving that space is important to internalize and come up with. Every line I think you brought in was mesmerizing, and the last one, if I can, you can do. That's the calling. So I'm sure my listeners will enjoy it and really appreciate your time. It's been wonderful having you on my show.
Jyoti, it was a great pleasure talking to you, and thank you for having me. I'm really amazed how we connected and you reached out. It was completely by chance, but it's very great that we spoke, and I'm sure your listeners would have something to take away from this conversation. I'm grateful for you to you for having me, and in the august company of so many people who have spoken to you on their life journeys, and I'm sure there's a lot for us to learn from each other. Thank you for having me here, Jyoti, and I wish your readers, sorry, listeners, I'm so used to saying readers, listeners, all the best and happy stories to them. I hope they find it of value.
That's really great, and gratitude, Nidhi.
So, friends, I hope you enjoyed this conversation. And if you have got any learning or motivated hearing to this show, then make sure you share this podcast with your friends and post it on all social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, Insta. And do tag us and let your friends know about this amazing information you have learned, and let this piece of information help many others to engage, enlighten, and empower. Thank you so much for your patience and tuning into this show. Bye for now. Take good care of yourself and go out and do something engaging, enlightening, and empowering.